Now, some of you might not realise, but we're recording the stories that people are telling this afternoon. So when I finish my story, I want you to all stand up and cheer and clap above your heads and say, Colin, that was unbelievable! Now, I am a teller of traditional tales, most of the time. Today I thought I would tell you hardcore traditional storytelling tale. It involves a king, a princess, and a young lad called Jack. And you can't get much more traditional than that. There's a kingdom, had a king, the king had a daughter. And when the princess was of a marriageable age, the king said, "You're going to marry the prince from the kingdom that adjoins ours. It will be perfect in every way." And the princess said, "No, have you seen him? He is so ugly, and he's old enough to be my grandfather. I refuse." And the king said, "You don't have a say in this. You will marry who I say." And they argued back and forth. And the princess started to pout. And she said to her father, "You've made me unhappy. And I'll tell you this. I will not marry until a man makes me laugh. And you can bring who you want, but until they make me laugh, I will not marry anyone." And she had a downward looking face. And from that day on, she never smiled, she never giggled, she never laughed. She would be there on the huge table at the front when a feast was there, and there would be jugglers, and there would be jesters, and there would be other people starting with J, but no matter what they did, she never cracked a smile. And this went on and on and on. And so the king made a decree, and he said, "Whomsoever comes and makes my daughter laugh will have her hand in marriage and half of my kingdom. But I don't want anybody turning up on the off chance. So if anyone comes and tries and fails, their backs will be whipped and salt will be rubbed into their wounds." And I'm sorry to say that in that kingdom over the next 2 months, there were lots and lots and lots of men with very sore backs. And we'll leave the princess there in her gloom and move across the landscape to the common where Jack lived with his mother. They were poor, they had very little. The only money that came in was from Jack's mother, who took in darning and clothes mending and got enough money to keep them going. What did Jack do? Jack did nothing. During the summer months, Jack would lie in the sun. During the winter months, Jack would lie in the kitchen near the range. He did nothing. And this went on for year after year until finally his mother cracked and she said, "Jack, if you don't bring some wages into this house, there'll be no porridge for you in the morning and no stew for you at night." And just like that, it did the trick, because Jack loved his porridge and he loved his stew. So the very next day he got up at the crack of dawn and he went to a local farmer and he hired himself out for the day. And he worked harder than 10 men. The farmer couldn't believe how hard Jack worked. And at the end of the day he said, "Jack, thank you. Have this penny, a whole penny." And Jack had never seen a coin before. And so he put it in his hand and he looked at it, and he juggled with it, and he flipped it in the air and he started to walk home. And everything went well until he got to a bridge, he got to the crown of the bridge and he tripped, and the coin flew through the air into the river and was lost. And he went home to his mother and he explained what had happened. And let me just stop there. Now, what we haven't had this afternoon is any audience participation. So there's a little bit coming up here. She turned to her son Jack, and in the best Dad's Army tradition, she said, "You stupid boy." Remember that phrase. It may reoccur. If you didn't have any pockets, you should have taken off a sock and put the coin in the sock and tied the sock on your wrist, and then no matter how times you've tripped and fell, the coin wouldn't have been lost, and we could have fed ourselves for a fortnight from that penny. And Jack said, I'm sorry. I'll remember what you said. And the next day he got up at the crack of dawn, and he went and hired his services out to the local dairy farmer. And he worked harder than 10 men, and the dairy farmer was impressed. And at the end of the day, he said, I must give you some wages, Jack. I haven't got any money, but have this container of milk, sealed container of milk. And Jack said, thank you very much. And he remembered what his mother had said. So he unscrewed the top, he took off his sock, and he poured the milk into his sock, and he tied it around his wrist. And by the time he got home, all he had was a damp sock. And he told his mother what he had done, and she said, You stupid boy! You shouldn't have done that. It was a sealed container, you should have just put it on your head and carried it home. What's wrong with you? And he said, I'm sorry, mother. I'll remember what you said. At crack of dawn the next day, he was up again. And he went into the nearest town, and he worked all day for the vet. And the vet was so pleased at the amount of work he got through. At the end of the day, he looked round and he said, have my cat as your wages for the day. And Jack said, thank you very much. And he remembered what his mother had said, so he put the cat on his head. And he started to walk home. And he'd only got a few yards when the cat scratched and yowled, scratched his scalp. And Jack let go, and the cat, whoomph! He was off, never to be seen again. When Jack got to his mother, he said what had happened. And his mother said, oh, you stupid boy! You shouldn't have put a cat on your head. You should have tied a piece of string around its neck. And you should have led it home. And if it wouldn't walk, you should have just dragged it. And Jack said, I'm very sorry. I'll remember what you said. And the next day, Jack, he got up at the crack of dawn. And this time, he went into that same town and he hired himself to the butcher for the whole day. And the butcher had never seen such a work, and he was very impressed. He was so impressed at the end of the day, he said, Jack, you've earned this, and he gave Jack a whole leg of lamb. And Jack remembered what his mother had said. And so he tied a piece of string around the leg of lamb, and he tried to get it to walk home. But the leg of lamb wouldn't walk. And so he dragged it. And he got a few yards before dogs came from seemingly everywhere, snarling and grappling over the meat. They pulled it off the piece of string, and they disappeared with it. And when Jack got home, his mother said, oh, you stupid boy. Why didn't you just pick up the leg of lamb and put it on your shoulder and carry it home? What's wrong with you? And Jack said, I'm sorry, but I'll remember what you said. So the next day, he got up at the crack of dawn, and this time he went and he worked in the local mine. And he was underground all day, and he shifted so much of whatever they were mining down that mine that all the miners were impressed. They'd never seen somebody work so hard. And at the end, all the miners got together to decide what they would reward Jack with for his day's work. And somebody said, well, we've got a spare donkey. And they said, yes. And so they presented Jack with a whole live donkey. And Jack looked at the donkey, and the donkey looked at Jack. And Jack threw himself on the donkey, and there was dust everywhere. But finally Jack managed to get that donkey onto his shoulder, with its legs sticking up in the air. And he set off staggering towards his mother's house. And who should be coming from the other direction but the king and his daughter, the princess, in the royal carriage. And when the princess looked out and she saw Jack struggling with this donkey that was thrashing its legs in the air, she smiled. And then she giggled. And then she laughed. And so Jack was married to the princess. And he was given half of the kingdom. And the wedding was superb. It was such a feast. I wish you all could have been there. And whether they lived happily ever after, I don't know. I somehow doubt it. But their meeting was responsible for a cracking good story.